All right, fantastic. So we're here today on the InsurTech Leadership Podcast, and pleased to welcome Scott Sambucci here today. He's Managing Director at NayaOne. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Josh. Really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Apologies for starting late. That was my fault due to some technical
Happens.
difficulties on our end. But anyway, glad we're on. So, just by way of background, Scott has raced 200-mile ultramarathons and scaled billion-dollar tech companies. Most strategic work may be what he's doing now. As managing director at NayaOne, Scott helps the world's largest banks and public institutions accelerate innovation and tech adoption. So today we're going to explore leadership decisions behind fintech transformation, challenges of hiring at scale in regulated industries, and how endurance outside of work shapes judgment inside it. So from ultramarathons to market shifts, we're going to talk about leading innovation in financial services. So Scott, that's quite a lot there, both in and outside of the work world. So
Yeah.
maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your kind of leadership path and how that led to what you're doing at NayaOne.
Yeah. So I've spent 25 years, moved out to Silicon Valley 25 years ago, working at startups and predominantly focused on the financial market in different ways. So including a company called CoreLogic, which is previously publicly traded. I was an executive there doing data analytics work, and then went to Blend Labs, which is a software platform for large scale banks. And then from there, I've been advising and working with insurtech and fintech companies over the years. So I met Karan Jang, who's the founder here at NayaOne, via some advisory work I was doing with him and his team back in 2023. And after about 9 months of coaching and consulting, his question to me was, "Look, how do we get more Scott?" And I said, "Well, I'm mostly advising, but we can do a bigger engagement." So we did about a fourth quarter of 23, a larger engagement, and by January 24, I was sold on the company. I went with him to Money 2020 in 2023. He said, "Just come along, shadow me, join some meetings." And within about 8 hours, by the end of the first day, I said, "What you've built here is a utility that every financial institution is going to need, whether they know it or not right now. And I want to be part of that ride." So January 24, I took a full-time role as managing director and now lead all of the US Canadian operations for the company that's based in London.
Got it. So what is that thing?
So that utility that we're building is, the short answer is what we refer to as a vendor delivery infrastructure. What that means is when you look at a regulated institution, bank, insurance company, public institution, there's a lot of guardrails when it comes to adopting new technology. And those guardrails are there for a reason, right? If you want to bring any new vendor in, and especially today's world with artificial intelligence, there's a series of checklists that you have to go through. There's vendor, security, risk, compliance, legal. Everybody inside of that institution that's designed to protect the institution from bad actors has to review any piece of technology before it can even run through a very simple proof of concept or pilot. And so in the world that we live in today, that's particularly challenging for these institutions. If you take insurance, there's all of the upstart insurance companies out there like Lemonade and others. On the banking world, there's multiple vectors where they're getting hit on competitive market space. So there's payments apps, there are international transfer apps, there's neobanks popping up. And so one of the key ways that any of these institutions can keep up with competitors is to bring in new technology to improve consumer experience, to improve customer experience so that they can meet the needs of their customers. So now you're in this conundrum where we need to bring in new technology, but we have 6, 9, 12 months of third-party risk management, security, risk, compliance. Everyone needs to make sure this new piece of tech is safe and secure before we can even test it. So by nature, every bank out there is going to be 12 months behind their competitive landscape because those competitors don't have those same guardrails yet. So what we provide, the utility that we provide, is an air-gapped, off-estate digital sandbox. And in that sandbox is where our customers can take new technology and run proof of concepts. They can run technical assessments. They can test integrations with core systems and do all of that in a matter of weeks because we are completely off a state and we're completely external. So we provide them the ability to test quickly and assess which technology, whether it's agentic AI, Gen AI solutions, or even, renewals of existing tech, to figure out which new technology platforms are going to be ideal for them so that they can move much more quickly and keep up in a competitive landscape.
So is this technology applicable for any industry, but you guys are just focused on fintech because of the
Yeah, I mean,
regulatory framework, or?
Yeah, I mean, your intuition is exactly right there, Joshua. So we do receive inquiries from automotive, transportation, manufacturing, food, beverage. We focus on financial services for a couple of reasons. One, our company founder is a former head of technology at Westpac Bank, so a large-scale Australian bank. He built the company because he went out shopping looking for a platform that would allow him to move quickly when 6-7 years ago, you have all of the fintechs popping up, and he's looking for ways to improve the tech stack, to improve customer experience. Even though procurement rolled into his organization, he still could not test quickly. So in a sense, we're born by a banker, and all of the senior team here have all had banking experience, whether working at banks as executives or, in my case, working with banks and financial services companies to implement software. And so this is where we found the pain to be very acute. And while there's a total addressable market that could be any industry, we choose to focus on financial services for now.
Got it. And in terms of because you mentioned like Australian bank, headquartered in London, you're in the US, like what markets are you focused on specifically?
Yeah, good question. So like I said, born in London, we still maintain our headquarters in London. And so several years ago, we brought on some of our earlier customers, Barclays Bank, Lloyds Bank, for example. So very large scale banking institutions, as well as the FCA. So if you're not familiar with the FCA, it's basically the equivalent of the SEC here in the United States. So it's a regulator of financial markets. So those key early customers have taught us a lot about the platform, and obviously created a lot of reputation for us, success reputation, having worked with them over the years. And so more recently, since 2023, when they first engaged with me as an advisor, is when the company said, okay, we've had good success here in the UK. Obviously, the huge market is in the United States and Canada. And that's where we landed and started adding customers here in this part of the world. We do also sell into the Middle East. Most of that is inbound. Obviously, tons of money in the Middle East, lots of interesting growth happening from a technology and banking standpoint in the Middle East. And so while we don't specifically go out and look for new customers because of the opportunities there, we don't want to miss out. So for now, it's UK, Europe, based in the London office, United States, Canada, with me and my team here. And then we handle the Middle East as those leads come in.
So I actually co-founded a fintech company quite a while ago now. But one of our strategic advisors was Royal and Son Alliance. Investors was Royal and Son Alliance, and we were doing some stuff in the UK. AMP in Australia was a client. We did a joint venture in Japan with SoftBank, and we had to, different area of the business, but we had to be regulatory compliant and in all those markets. Do you have to deal with that issue, or because of the nature of the air gap sandbox, you're just sort of providing a place to play, but you don't necessarily have to deal with specific regulatory issues?
So it's an interesting question, because the way we describe it to our customers is, when you work with NayaOne, we as a vendor need to go through your security, risk, compliance, TPRM process. But once you do that once with us, any future piece of technology that you want to test, whether it's a fintech vendor, an ID verification vendor, an AI solution, even large scale applications like CrowdStrike have been tested inside of our sandbox. The good news is, once you've vetted us, because we are air gapped, we then take on the risk of anything happening. And more so, because we're off a state, anything that happens inside of a NayaOne environment is completely separate. And there's literally no technical way that anything that happens in our sandbox can affect anything that's happening inside of that financial institutions. And so the throughput of that it's really interesting, because as we are getting approved through third-party risk management, it further cements for our executive sponsors why they need us. Because of course it's a rigorous process, and we have all of the SOC 2 audits and everything required, but it's a 6-month process. It can be 6 months long for us to get approved. And they get frustrated. They're like, I just want to move forward with NayaOne. I just want to get this thing rolling. Why is this taking so long? And we tell them, like, this is why you need us. Because if there's hundreds of vendors that you might want to test out there. If you would need to do this with 100 vendors, imagine why. This is exactly why you're not making the progress you want to make. So yeah, we run through that approval process once, but then that allows them to test any vendor, ranging from a YC Combinator, a Y Combinator startup, all the way up into some of the cloud vendors or large scale vendors like CrowdStrike.
So it strikes me that you guys would probably have, therefore, some very interesting insights in what people are investing in or what technologies are trending, et cetera. So is that an aspect of your business model as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously we're getting, we have hundreds and hundreds of projects that we run through the platform over the years, and they kind of fall into a couple of key categories. And then there has been, as you mentioned, evolution of the types of projects. So before AI was a thing a couple of years ago, we had plenty of projects running through, and many of those would be what you consider kind of your block and tackle point solutions. So ID verification, fraud detection, OCR solutions, anything that's around operational efficiency. Could be new customer onboarding. So banks always looking for ways to encourage their customers and new customers to increase deposits. So all those things that a bank might need to do in order to improve efficiency or generate revenue. Now, over time, of course, now increasing number of those projects tend to be in the AI area. So they could be, for example, we have several banks that will run a multi LLM proof of concept, meaning they'll pull in multiple LLMs like a ChatGPT, Gemini, and others, and just basically do a side-by-side assessment. And so because we are detached, it's the only way they would be able to actually touch those systems, so they can identify which of those vendors might be the right one. So we definitely see more and more projects in the AI space. We're even talking to some regulators right now about doing POCs when it comes to stablecoins and even quantum computing. So the technology never stops in terms of its progression. It's just what changes. It's what the new thing is. It used to be 15 years ago, banks needed a website so people could do online banking, and then it was mobile banking, and it was lending, and it was payments. AI is a step in the way. Then it will be stable coins and quantum and everything else. So for now, AI is increasing. Now, secondly, we do see pockets categories. So AI being a category of technology that gets tested. We see quite a bit in the ID verification and fraud detection. The bad guys are getting smarter, and there's more systems to break into. So we see a constant stream of projects around finding new vendors and partners to assess risk and remove fraud. And then that also dovetails into cybersecurity. So cybersecurity, looking at finding vendors that protect the security perimeter and make the bank safe. So that's an area. Another area we see obviously is payments. Lots of competition, ways to think through how money gets transacted, both for personal banking and commercial banking is a big area. So those are just a couple that sort of take the plurality of the projects that we run.
Apologies if I missed this or misinterpreted this, but if I am one of those technology vendors, once I go through a NayaOne process, does that make it easier than when the next financial institution wants to get on board?
It does. So while we sell to banks, and they're the ones that pay the bill for our license and use our platform every day, turns out vendors equally or even more so love us, because I've been on that vendor side. I told you I was with CoreLogic, I was with Blend, I've been with other companies selling to these financial institutions. And there's nothing more frustrating than to make good progress with your sales demo and have good early conversations, but then be told, okay, we'd like to run a pilot. We'd like to onboard you. It's just going to take 9 months for you to fill out all this paperwork. And then you fill out the paperwork, and 9 months later, what happens sometimes? Your executive sponsor leaves. Yeah. So now that project is dead. You find out that they don't have the systems that they said they do. or you find out that the use case actually isn't the match that you thought it was, and now you've spent close to a year on a deal only to find out it's not a match. And we're told in sales constantly qualify, right? So vendors love us because they know if their technology is the right technology for the bank or the insurance company, it gives them a chance to show that quickly. And then that creates, once that proof point is established in a matter of weeks in a proof of concept or other kind of technical evaluation, now that executive sponsor has all of the information they need around risk, security, compliance, everything else around that vendor platform to then move them more quickly through procurement. So a lot of times we actually have vendors that have had a great experience working with us at one bank and then have said to us, hey, here's my sales pipeline. These are the other 20 financial institutions we're selling to. Can you tell me where else NayaOne?
You guys are in. Yeah.
Because we'd like to run this process again with as many of our pipeline deals as possible.
Yeah, interesting. So this is called the InsurTech Leadership Podcast. So maybe we can just dial in a little bit on insurance and,
of course,
what types of organizations, either, whether it's carrier or line of business or however you break it out or think about it, but, where you're seeing activity or
sure,
what some of the use cases are you're seeing.
Yeah, so if we transition specifically into the insurance market, so first area is claims. The claims journey is one that most large-scale insurance companies we work with, P&C carriers in particular, they're looking to modernize that whole process from the time that they receive a claim request, that first notice of loss, all the way through to, the assessment, the adjustment, the investigation, the payment, the litigation that's involved. There's a huge opportunity that most large P&C carriers have recognized to improve that whole process from beginning to end. Now, again, many times that could be an AI-related solution. It could be, for example, we see in the claims world, just that first notice of loss, when those emails are coming in, those phone calls are coming into call centers, being able to triage with intelligent technology to be able to summarize what the case is, be able to quickly route the use case or the request that's coming in based on prioritization. Somebody who's, a tree is falling on the roof of the house gets a different priority than somebody who's telling them that, hey, I got a bike stolen out of my garage. So being able to automate that when many of these large carriers are getting literally tens of thousands of these requests every day, that's kind of tip of the spear for them, which then improves that first touch point is really, it's long said in the insurance business that, the place of that engagement, it's like how you handle the claim is how you retain that customer. Because if you handle that claim poorly, then it's very likely that the customer will switch. So even be able to respond quickly or respond appropriately to help that person feel like they've been seen is a key part of that whole claims process. And then you can start extending that through the rest of that process I mapped out, again, with automation tools, improved technology, better routing, reading contracts, reading litigation.
Yeah.
All of those aspects, and then into payments as well. So we actually see quite a few projects run on the payment side, just like you would expect from a banking standpoint, or like how do we route payments? Insurance companies need to do the same thing. So we see that as a big part of our usage of the platform on the insurance side.
And is it mostly carriers you're working with on the insurance industry?
Yeah, so our primary focus right now is the top P&C carriers in the United States and Canada and top life insurance carriers. There are adjacent markets, as we talked about before. There's health insurance and the whole health vertical. There are nuances to that market that we want to be careful not to extend ourselves too far in terms of our knowledge and our expertise. So for now, there's plenty to be had, plenty of health help. We have no shortage of requests coming in from anywhere from some of the largest companies in the United States all the way through to regional carriers that are really struggling for different reasons because of regional types of claims they might have.
Are you seeing any change, either companies that maybe historically have been hamstrung by legacy systems or ways this type of technology enables them to work around that?
Yeah, I mean, any major carrier or bank, there's kind of multiple layers of systems, and at the very core, you can see, banks, it's AS400 and COBOL based platforms, right? And then you start to stack on top of that. Typically, those legacy systems are going to have to stay, and so mostly what we end up seeing is the middleware layer, like a Guidewire or Duck Creek in the insurance space. Those are the predominant operational platforms on which these banks are working on a day-to-day business basis, right? And so where most of the carriers appreciate what our platform enables is the ability to not just assess a third-party tech solution in isolation, but also being able to test that third-party solution's ability to integrate or interoperate with Guidewire or Duck Creek or other systems like Salesforce, ServiceNow, et cetera. So that way, when it comes to making that purchasing decision, they're reducing the risk of implementation. They're reducing the risk of choosing wrongly, the false positives. And again, it allows them to speed up the implementation because now their developers have already had experience working directly with those third-party solutions and how they would connect with the APIs and other connectors within those core systems.
Got it. So just shifting gears a little bit, I mean, in terms of your own personal leadership story,
Yeah.
do you have a philosophy that you take in your approach to leadership? Was there maybe an aha moment that kind of helped you develop an approach to leadership along the way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I've necessarily had an aha moment. Like, I'm a very process-driven person, very analytical person. I joke with people that I tell them I took 3 different behavioral assessments just to make sure I was analytical. So what I find is, as it pertains, for example, to ultramarathons, where I've spent a lot of time endurance events, there's a couple key principles to be successful in those kinds of long-term events. So the first principle is relentless forward progress. I have a good friend of mine that we just talk about that. Like, you're on a trail, you have 50 miles down, you got 50 miles to go. No one's coming to help you. Like, no one can pick you up and take you to the finish line. So it doesn't matter how good or bad you feel. You just have to keep moving. Things are going to go wrong in a 100-mile race. You're going to get blisters. You're not going to feel well. Your stomach might turn. The weather can turn. I've been on races where I've been both sunburned and, 14 hours later getting snowed on. And
Right.
you just don't know when you're moving up and down in the mountains, and then there's thunderstorms. So you got to deal with these exogenous shocks as they come along. You can't control everything, but what you can control is your effort. What you can control is the ability to just keep moving forward, regardless of the types of barriers or obstacles that might come up. Now, in order to keep doing that, in order to have that relentless forward progress, and this is where I think from a leadership standpoint, it becomes really important is one is the planning, right? You can't just go into the race without the preparation of the training, but more so knowing that what's the race plan I'm going to have. There's ups and downs literally on the course. There's different terrain. There's different times you're going to be feeling better, feeling worse. You've got to plan out station to station, like aid station to aid station. What's this race going to be like? How am I going to feel? What am I going to eat? Is my crew going to be available to join me at a certain spot where they can help me with certain things? You've got to have that plan and then be able, of course, to adjust based on those exogenous shocks. So from a leadership standpoint, like, having a plan of action is critical. And then the second thing I learned from a leadership standpoint is you're doing this race on your own. You're out there. You're the only one that can move your feet forward. But it really does take literally dozens of people to get you to the finish line. There's the support at home with my wife and my son who understand, okay, it's Saturday morning. Dad's going to go out for a 6-hour run. He'll be back. But when he gets back, we'll do the family stuff. It takes support of thousands of volunteers across a large race, working aid stations, spending their time to be there at 2:00 in the morning to make sure that you can get a coffee or you can get a Mountain Dew if you need it. You can't do these races without those people. It takes the race organizers. It takes the government officials that are willing to give you the permits, to give the race officials the permits to run through these places sometimes. So as much as it's, you finish the finish line and you're the one that gets the medal or you get the buckle when you finish, it really is like literally dozens or even hundreds of people or thousands of people that help get you there. And from a leadership standpoint, as much as we feel like we're the ones that are out there on our own, I think it's important that we involve all of those people and appreciate all of those people that are going to help us get to where we want to go, because without them, we can't do anything.
So that sort of desire for relentless progress, is that what you look for when you're hiring? Or like, I mean, not everybody has the mindset to go run a 100-mile ultra marathon or do an Ironman. So,
Yeah. Or the
does
stupidity.
that like
Uh-huh.
does that
Yeah.
potentially cause, communication challenges or other issues when maybe not
Yeah.
everybody's quite at that level? Or do you just only find the people who can run at that pace or in that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've worked at large companies like CoreLogic and other. I've worked at Pearson Education, which is a large publicly traded company, and there's plenty of people that are successful there that don't do ultra marathons. But being in that kind of environment, you don't necessarily need to have the same doggedness or the same grit, because there's multiple people doing different things for you. You've got, if you're in a sales position, if you're at a big company, you've got marketing that's doing the branding and then sponsoring the booth and then doing the big event and then beeping the badges, and then somebody's calling that person maybe ahead of time and qualifying the lead and then handing it to you. So you don't have to have that muscle to go out and bird dog new leads all of the time, for example. The same on the product side, right? You might have a team of engineers you could send some tasks to and then have them come back to you. When you're doing innovation in these large companies, or in our case, as a software company selling to these large companies, there has to be a certain element of ownership around everything that happens every day. There's a concept called extreme ownership, which I learned from listening to Jocko Willink. And I think it's very true when we're looking at building the team here, that, when I took this role in the US, like, I was the US operations, and our team is back in London and I'm in California, right? So it's an 8-9 hour difference. And so, it's up to me to get up at 5 a.m. and do those calls when I need the help and the support from that team. It's up to me to communicate back. It's up to me to set the meetings. It's up to me to decide, okay, I'm going to take this trip to Chicago, and while I'm headed that way, you know what, I'm going to take a detour and spend some time in Columbus and do some recruiting. And then, by the way, we got a client up in Minneapolis, so I'm going to add a day onto that trip and spend 2 hours with one client. And even though that means one more day of travel, I had this week. We're coming back from Minneapolis. I got stopped in Denver. There's a big United shutdown, and I'm spending another night on the road because I couldn't get back home. There's a certain kind of doggedness and persistence and ownership that comes down to, like, if this thing is going to happen, it's going to be up to me, and it's my responsibility to make sure I'm leveraging the resources, leveraging the team, activating everything that's around me, because things just don't happen on their own. So whether it's, me working as a software company now, having a team around me is a luxury, or you're trying to push innovation through a large scale company, there's nobody there to work you through. You can sit down on the trail, and I've done this middle of the night, lay down looking at the stars with 78 miles down and 22 to go, and like, what am I doing?
Right.
Like, I've been on this trail for 22 hours and I still got another 10 to go.
Right.
Like, how badly do I want this? And so then it's just, okay, how do I break this down? How do I get to the next aid station? Where do I reset? How do I leverage that team and those resources and those people to help me get back on track? And so I think there's just a lot of it is just being gritty, being dogged, and willing to take ownership of everything that happens.
So, due to my technical screw up in the beginning, we started a little late and we've run a little over now, so I'm sensitive to that. I guess, one last question I have is, anything in terms of the next 12 months, 24 months for NayaOne that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think like, it's interesting when you launch a company and you start selling your product. You launch the company, you sell the product for the reason that you think you're selling the product. Like, this is the problem we see, and this is the product we build, and then we get some customers. We've had the joy of having customers teach us how they're using the platform. When Karin launched the company, it was out of personal pain. I'm a CTO. I'm a head of technology. I need a place to go test new technology. And that's what we called it. We called it FinTech Sandbox. I mean, that was the original name of the company. And that was fine for a couple of years. It's like everyone needs a place to run POCs quickly in SaaS tech. What's been really joyful for us is how our customers have transitioned. And yes, POCs and tech assessments are a part of the chain, but there's so much research and evaluation that happens even before you bring a piece of technology into a proof of concept. So we have to discover them, we have to research them, we have to do demos and evaluate them. And all of that can happen inside of NayaOne. Then you move them into a proof of concept. And then after the proof of concept, you need to test integrations with Guidewire or Duck Creek. And then you need to test waterfalls of multiple vendors. And then once you decide I'm going to buy that vendor, we're going to move that vendor into our third-party risk management. That's going to take 6 months. Meanwhile, let's keep this NayaOne environment open for our developers to keep building so that when the vendor is approved, we can just export that code out and move it into production quickly. And so what we get really excited about is the evolution of how the platform is being used on a day-to-day basis. And really everything from like, hey, we found this brand new agentic AI solution yesterday, and being able to take that vendor through the entire journey over a 12, 14, 16, 18-month period to the point where it's now onboarded. And NayaOne is a part of that journey every step of the way for our customers. So that's where I get really excited, because when our customers show us the dev environments or they show us the waterfalls they've built, and we didn't have to do anything other than make the platform available, it's very satisfying to know that we built something that's so flexible and fungible that our customers can teach us what's possible. And that true partnership is why we've been successful over the years.
Yeah, great, cool. Anything else, Scott, you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I would say that, for the next, couple of months into the second half of this year, we're going to be very active in the insurance market. We've had some really good success with customers that we have. We're going to be ramping that up. So you'll be able to find us at places like ITC conference in Las Vegas, of course. There's the Connected Claims conference from Reuters. There's a number of different sort of big events that you'll find us at. And also, if you go to our website, NayaOne.com, there's lots of great information about our claims lab that's available. We're actually running our own webinar about AI and what AI looks like when done properly for claims, coming up later this month. So you just go to the website, follow the company on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn. You're going to see a lot more content and education coming out. And I think if you just join us as part of that journey over these couple of months, then I think that will help anybody that engages with us see how we're going to be able to help them on an individual basis to contribute to the overall success of their insurance company.
Cool. Well, we'll have to maybe try to catch up in person at ITC.
Sure.
And
That'd be wonderful. Yeah, we'll do a part two. Do a live.
Yeah, we can do. Well, I actually did. I don't even know how many interviews at ITC last year. I'm not sure I'm going to do that again because I was pretty wiped out after
I can imagine
back-to-back interviews. But yeah, no, we'll be out there, and be good to connect in person. So
likewise.
Scott Sambucci.
Thanks very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was a good conversation. Thanks for sharing. Interesting stuff you're doing, and so look forward to seeing your continued progress. So, Scott Sambucci, the manager